This is the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show on December 1st, 2022. This is the 127th episode. My name's Andy Zee. I'm the host of the show, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Hello, Sunsara.
Hi, Andy. My name is Sunsara Taylor. I'm the co-host of the show, and we want to welcome everybody tuning in for the first time and to all our returning viewers.
Sunsara, it's been another week of tumultuous events in the world, each of which shocks the conscience. The heroic struggle of Iran continues to spread as it enters its 11th week. At the same time, scores of children, kids, teenagers have been killed by this regime, with tens of thousands rounded up. The ratcheting up of nuclear war preparations continues from China to North Korea to Russia, and all of this accelerated by the threats from the U.S. that it could answer with an Armageddon. Women enduring forced motherhood and other horrors in states across the country where abortion is now effectively banned, and there's accelerating climate devastation, all while the youth in America's inner cities are trapped in a vicious life of brutality, prison, police murder, and a war where they're killing each other just to survive in a country that has no future for them. All of this cries out for revolution, the only solution, which is what this the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show is dedicated to. And into this roiling world, we have introduced the Bob Avakian interviews on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. There are 3 interviews, and they are now up on our YouTube channel. There's nothing else like them, with the heart and soul, the revolutionary passion, the science, the conviction, the determination, and the roadmap for a revolution to overthrow this system and replace it with a different and far better society on the road to human emancipation.
Today, we will experience the impact that these Bob Avakian interviews can have. We're going to share a powerful portion of the interviews and a deep discussion responding to this that Andy led with members of the Chicago Revolution Club. Then later in the show, we'll share with you the vision of and invite you into a major fundraising campaign being launched by the RevComs to spread these interviews everywhere and build this movement for a real revolution. And finally, at the end of the show, we'll have a segment from Rafael Kadaris on the outrageous gathering of straight-up Nazis, Trump, Kanye West, and Nick Fuentes at Mar-a-Lago. So with that, let's dive in. I want to welcome 3 members of the Revolution Club in Chicago. Leo, how you doing?
I'm all right. I'm doing good.
All right. Roosevelt.
Hey.
And Hank.
All right. How you doing?
All right. Okay, good. So we're really glad to have all 3 of you from the Revolution Club in Chicago on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. Here's our plan. We're going to play a question and answer that Bob Avakian gave near the end of the 3rd and final interview that the RNL show recently did with him. And at different points throughout each of these 3 interviews, Bob Avakian spoke directly to the youth who catch the hardest hell under this system. Youth for whom this system has no future, who find themselves caught in a trap where just to survive, just to have some respect as they see it, they are killing, maiming, and shooting each other, sometimes block against block in neighborhoods where they are dogged, arrested, and thrown in prisons for long bids, brutalized, and even murdered by the pig enforcers of this system. And towards the end of the 3rd interview, we asked Bob Avakian if he wanted to give a final message to these youth. So let's go to the interview and then we'll talk.
Well, you've led us right back to something we wanted to return to before wrapping up this interview, which is the tremendous potential that it's clear you see in those at the very bottom of society. Youth in particular, at the base of society, caught up catching the worst hell, the youth and others in the prisons, which you said the brother on the block or on the street people who right now their guns are pointed at each other to way too large a degree. All of the vision of what you've described of what's possible to do with state power is not going to happen if we don't make a revolution. And yet this is a section of people who are very critical to the revolution we need. So I wanted to give you, and we wanted to give you one further opportunity to speak directly to those who are catching the worst hell and treated as the worst of the worst. What is their role in this revolution, and to those going out to them? How should we do this?
Well, I say there's both a personal dimension to this and a larger scientific dimension to it. I know that things have gone on for generations now. I mean, I know some people told us, well, you can't bring forward these youth. They might have been revolutionary once back in the day of the Black Panther Party or what, the 1960s. But there's been generation after generation caught up in this bad shit now, so there's no potential anymore. Yes, there is potential, and in one sense, it's exactly because they have been caught up in it generation after generation that there is potential. But you're not going to see it if you're just looking on the surface and what people are into. You have to go a little deeper with people. And I'll just introduce a personal dimension to this, which is very real for me. When I see, and whenever I get a chance to interact, and I do sometimes with some of these youth you're talking about, I see people that I knew when I was coming up. Not that I came out of the same place they did, but people that I knew, and I know what their potential was. I've talked about this before. I've written about it before. I had a friend, Billy, who got into the life and got killed, while he's still in his 20s, caught up in a lot of bad shit, and did bad shit. But also had a whole other side to him. Had a curious mind, a sharp mind, had a lot of very good, sentiments toward people, ways of relating to people. And, you could not have told me that somebody like that couldn't be transformed to become a revolutionary, because I knew better. And that's just a personal, and I knew other people in the same situation. I'm very fortunate to know people in this situation, people who open their hearts to me the same way I did with them. That's what it means to be friends. And you learn what's deeper beneath the surface of what's going on and why people are into the bad shit they're in. And, how constricted, how limited and confined their lives are and their choices are, in terms of how things are presented to them. And so that's like, on the basis of that personal experience, I don't care that generations have gone, I care, but it doesn't tell me because generations have gone on that these aren't basically the same people. They are the same people, and when I interact with them, whenever I get a chance, and it's far too rare, but it's very precious, I know they're the same people. So that's on the personal level, from personal experience, but more scientifically, you can analyze where do the actual interests of these youth lie. Look, I've spoken this before, look what it means when even for a brief time, people in this situation rise above this. And I would mention this prisoner strike in Alabama, and people are talking about how they've overcome the divisions of gangs and cliques and this kind of thing. It's not going to last because of the conditions they're in, but it's very significant and precious when it happens. Or, I've made this point about the truce that followed, the gang truces that followed the 1992, L.A. rebellion, which really wasn't just L.A. rebellion, it spread around the country. And, how hard people tried to overcome generations of divisions and back and forth revenge. To me, one of the most inspiring and moving things I've seen in decades was the picture after the L.A. rebellion. Besides, blacks and Mexicans together tonight with graffiti, there is a picture of a blood and a crip with their arms around each other. And that wasn't just for show. That was something real and something deep. And they really tried to overcome this, and they put forward a program, but their program was just a program that had no basis And it was also just actually mirroring this existing system. It was a program to establish more black businesses to enable some of these people caught up in the gangs to get into, the economy by way of business and so on. And there's no economic basis for that on a broad scale. And it wouldn't lead to the liberation of people either, because, a few people might get into business, but then, most people can't. And plus the ones who do are going to be employing other people and exploiting them, whether they mean to or not. But still, look how hard people tried. And there was a prisoner, strike in California a number of years ago, the same kind of thing. Yeah, the gangs are still in there, and yeah, there's bad shit, but they rose up and overcame that for a short period of time. And that shows the potential, and it also shows that there's something deeper in people than what they're doing every day and what they're caught up in. That they reach for something better, something higher. They want something different, and if you get people away from what they're caught up in, and talk to them heart to heart, they will tell you in many cases, most people want something different, even if they're caught up in this and they don't know how to get out of it. And that's where we come in, the revolutionaries, the people who have come to understand that there's a whole different way. We have to go to these youth and others. Yes, we need to go to the educated youth. You're not going to make a revolution without people from the educated youth. That's very important for the revolution, including critical and creatively thinking people who have a capacity to, work and grapple with complicated ideas. We need that. But your question is very much to the point about, these more, youth down on the street, the hardcore youth, there is burning within them because nobody wants to live the way these youth are being forced to live. You could take maybe a few, really into it, and this is really their thing, but nobody, if you're talking about, I shouldn't say nobody, but overwhelmingly, people don't want to live the way people we're talking about are forced to live. But this system, we could go into why and how. It deindustrialized a lot, all these areas that people live in, like the south side of Chicago. Used to be these factories, a gigantic steel plant, U.S. Steel, that people used to work at. Gary, Indiana, which is now a ghost town, had the biggest steel plant in the entire world, I think, going back a few decades. And a lot of black people worked there. Those places are closed down. These youth coming up, they have no future. And that's because of the workings of this system. And there is a burning down there. It may be simmering. It may be just a flickering flame, but there is a burning for something better. And it is up to us to provide the vehicle and the means for all these masses of people in this situation, including these youth, to become part of fighting for something better. And yes, it goes back to the previous thing. We're not going to do it without a lot of struggle. You got to break through the surface. You got to break through the bullshit. You got to break through even the hardcore shit to get down to where people really live and feel. And then you got to struggle with them about what your life should really be all about. What is really worth dedicating and if necessary, even giving your life to? Not that we take that lightly. We certainly don't. We understand that, as Mao said, of all things in the world, people are most precious. And people's lives are precious to us. But even if you have to give your life, give it for something worthwhile, something that's going to mean something for you and people like you all over the world and for the little ones. And don't tell me you don't love the little ones. I see you out there pushing the little ones around. I see the pride that you have in the little ones. So don't tell me you don't care. Because I know different and I know better. And there is a way, but we got to give people the way. And that means a tremendous amount of struggle. It's not just handing them away and they're going to take it. It's a tremendous amount of struggle. And we have to also, especially in this rare time when revolution becomes more possible, we have to get right down on the ground with them and explain in terms they can understand, and then get more into the complexities as we go along. But get to the basic thing that there is a way out of all this. And right now we have more opportunity than we've had in your lifetime or my lifetime to do this. And we can't afford to be wasting this time and this opportunity in bullshit. We got to get with this revolution so we can get all this shit off of our backs and make a future for the next little kids you're pushing along that's worth living for, so they don't have to go through what you are going through now, which isn't what you wanted to go through, but it's what the system has put you in the place of to have to go through. We have to go and present this to them in a living way. There is a way out of this. It's not an easy way. It's not a guaranteed way, but it's a real way. It's a real possibility, especially in this time when we're talking about where the conditions are more favorable for revolution, even as they're tending right now towards something terrible. With the ruling class divided and fighting each other, with society being ripped apart, with the potential for this to rip apart all the dominant institutions in society. You know, one of these youth said, well, you know, if I get with your revolution, my chances of being taken out are just about 100%. But if I do what I'm doing, going up against people like me, maybe my chances are 50-50. Well, that's just wrong, like I've said before. You know, it's wrong in terms of what your life should be about, and it's wrong in terms of, you know, the possibilities for revolution. Because we have a real strategy, and we have a real, you know, method to grapple with the problems that lie on the road to revolution and actually break through and gather more and more forces to where a revolutionary struggle for power could actually have a chance to win. And you can't ask for more than that. You can't ask for more than a chance to win to get this whole fucking thing off your back. And this is what we're aiming for, and this is what we got to take to people and explain to them and struggle like hell with them about what speaks to their deeper feelings and hopes and aspirations, not just the shit they're caught up in on the surface. So I say, both from personal experience, which is limited, I know, but it tells me something, but also by scientific analysis and by learning from all different kinds of sources and getting every bit of knowledge I can, that there is a potential there. And we have to go and make that potential become a reality and struggle with people to become emancipators of humanity. And we start winning some, it's going to provide the basis to win more. And it's going to become a pole of attraction. And what people would really like to jump to will start getting expressed when they see a growing force out there that's real. And so this is my answer. We got to, you know, we have what these youth and the mass of people need, but it includes a lot of struggle with them, and we have to go and take that to them and wage that struggle, because this is for ending all the shit that they're being forced to go through, and all the shit that humanity is being put through and that they're threatened with now, with the destruction of the environment and this danger of nuclear war among these imperialists. We have to go to the people and give them the means to do what deep down they would love to do if they could understand scientifically that there's a basis for it. So that's what I would say.
What is your reaction, your personal reaction to this, and your thoughts about what BA is saying to the youth and what he's calling for as the way out of this madness?
I don't know. Each time I've seen it, it strikes me. It strikes me kind of hard. Seeing that when being an uncle, to some of the youngsters who lost their lives out there, to senseless gun violence, due to the way that this system have them set up. Sometimes I have to see some of my nephew's children. They're no longer here, and the thing that he said about, he's feel it in the heart, and you see the youngsters pushing their strollers, so they care, and this is fact. We know that they do care, I know that they do care, and some of them was able to do that before they left, and unfortunately my nephew Lonzo wasn't able to do that, and, for one, who was so, he was caught up in that lifestyle, but he wanted change. And to hear Bob, B.A. put it together the way that he did, it made me think of him, my nephews and their children and others, young men that, that I've spoken to while I was in prison, and them needing to vent and talk about the changes that they needed to go through, the things that they wish they could have done, but now they're in prison doing time. And I used to have hundreds, if not thousands of youngsters, come through and talk to me from various organizations, about their lifestyles, and the need to change. It's the same thing is out here. They need to, they want to change. They would like to change, but they don't know how to get up out of that system that got that hold on them, and that note that BA is putting forth, and something that we need to carry forth too is, the way how, to try to get them to recognize, to realize that, as BA said, the potential, that they possess.
I think about my own, my friends and family, but there's me. Fuck, growing up, even though I got involved very, very early, my parents told me all the time, you're going to be dead or in the penitentiary before you hit 21. All right. This has to do something with the system that you're growing up in and stuff like that. And BA is actually looking beneath all of that shit, talking about, and saying, look, something you can actually do something worthwhile with your life. And it's really, really important that we get this and see this. The carnage here in Chicago, but around the world is really building up with all these youth. I spoke earlier about having family members who've been a grandson who's being killed and all this stuff. Another one being shot 8 times and another one being shot 3 times and wanting to get out but can't get out. They feel like this is the only way that they can actually make ends meet in this society and stuff. So you have all of that going on. That's the one side, but BA actually directs us to look beneath all of that. All right. And I was tickled, just last time when he was talking about he's really struggling with the youth about getting out of this and doing something worthwhile with their life. And he makes the point, and deep down, this is something that they would really want to do. But then we have to go out and struggle like a mother with them.
That's a really powerful clip, and, as they were saying, it really powerfully speaks to the potential that's actually there, I have family, I have friends I've seen, caught up in the life when they have, higher aspirations, and, even just to pull that, this is what you got to do to make it, this is this is how you got to survive just to make it to the next day, even when the next day isn't guaranteed, and then, hearing all kind of stories, of, hanging out with somebody one moment and then they're not here the next day, It's one thing that Chicago is known for, especially during the summertime when it's hot out, you can't even, kids can't even go outside and play, in some neighborhoods because of, the violence and different things like that, and, but BA makes the point, that the youth who are going around and caught up in all this shit, they have tremendous potential, and, that's one thing I appreciate about Bob Avakian is that, he never loses sight of, their potential to actually be emancipators of humanity, and actually contribute to making this revolution, that can bring people out of all the shit that they're caught up in, and, I know people who are caught up in a life who wanted to be archaeologists and different things like that, but their dreams are smothered by this, system that says, that's not what, you should go for. You should go for this because that's how, you could make it to the next day, and, BA makes that point, just in terms of that, BA makes the point, earlier in the interviews that, people need awe and people need wonder, and what does it mean that this system tells you can't, live out those kind of dreams, just and so much hope and potential is being, squandered in the youth. And, I appreciate how, BA brings out, with tremendous heart, you have people that live in your heart, people that you really care for, and, even though they are caught up in all this shit, he sees that potential in people to actually, be emancipators of humanity, and that's, I guess that's one thing that I'm like really drawing inspiration from right now. Yeah.
I know, Hank, if I recall from the time we were in Chicago, you spoke once about the time when you were coming up and there was a movement for revolution that got you, that inspired you and sent you to a different place. And I think, there's things that we should talk about because we do have to forge a force for a revolution that would enable these youth to see another way. But that's going to take an awful lot of struggle. Let's go a little deeper so that people can see there actually is another way.
Just to add another personal dimension in terms of how I actually came forward, it was doing. Look, the civil rights movement was ebbing, and the Black Power struggle was coming forward. I'm a youth like all the other youth who out there at that time who was being gravitated toward that. This is one of the that's one of the reasons, just straight up, that I didn't end up dead in the penitentiary is because of that revolutionary movement that was out there. It provided an alternative to everything that was out there. And it wasn't just that I gravitated toward it. There's a lot of resistance, to different things and whatever. And being young and a lot of times without a clue, you just wanted to fight. That was my big thing. I just want to hit somebody, get rid of this shit. But then there's a whole question of people struggle with you about different things, And let me just say this too: it wasn't just the movement in itself that were radical. The more radical it was, the more I gravitated toward it. The more revolutionary it was, the more it meant something to me because it was rejecting everything I called myself rebelling, I guess, and shit at the time. And I didn't have a whole lot of understanding either. But it's a lot of struggle to break people out of some of the shit that they're in. And that has to be a big part of the thing that goes on here. And this is one of the things I also think in looking at this interview, recognizing all this potential that the youth have, he also makes it very clear, and it's not food, it's not coming from, I guess he said, a social worker point of view. you actually do have to struggle with these youth for them to actually get them to realize that potential. And again, I think this is something that we really do have to break with, and I break through with. But I also think these films, these clippings of this section, actually could be a big way in actually having to do that.
In the section of the interview that we just watched, he says that we got to break people out of the bullshit they're into. We got to really get beneath that hardcore exterior, that hardcore shitware, and get down to where people feel and where they live. And you have to struggle with them about what their life's about. And one of the things here is that, and why I was asking Hank the question about when he came up, is it matters if we build a force of people who are doing that. In other words, it's not just we got to struggle with individuals, and we got to struggle with individuals to get into this. And by getting into the revolution, that lets more people come into the revolution because it becomes a viable force. But I'd like to get into a little bit, what is it like? How do we get beneath the this hardcore shit?
Look, there's a lot of shit people are caught up in, and yeah, it's this dog eat dog system that forces you to, go against the people on the next block, down the street, people wearing different colors, shit like that. Instead of, actually fighting for something that's actually would make a radical difference, for, these youth that, we've, have in our minds and in our hearts. We got youngsters that come out and play inside and outside our organizing center here, and, even hearing what they're thinking, what they think about what's going on in the world, how, people are, lose their lives all the time, that can't be, just the only way the world is, and not only do we have to hope for something much better, but we actually have to go out there and fight for it, and, it's not pie in the sky, it's not some far off dream. It's actually, obtainable. We can actually make a revolution, but it's going to take, millions of people like you and millions of people nothing like you who are caught up catching the worst hell end of this system. You were speaking to the women question and the situation in places like Iran and, the fight for, the fight against patriarchal degradation, what is actually going to take to actually, break out of that, and bring out, what world, what future people that could actually have, people, there's people out here with sons and daughters that they don't want to grow up in this shit, and that has to be the concrete vision that we, go out and bring to people. Look, we have leadership for it. There's a blueprint for it in the Constitution and in the Constitution for a new socialist republic in North America and the new communism, where look, we're not just aiming for a world where some things are better for some people, but we're talking about emancipating all of humanity. And that's what's at stake. That's what. It's going to take a lot of heart, a lot of bravery, to actually go out and scientifically and consistently fight for it, because it's actually possible.
But before we close out, I want to just play a short clip from what we watched earlier.
One of these youth said, well, if I get with your revolution, my chances of being taken out are just about 100%. But if I do what I'm doing, going up against people like me, maybe my chances are 50-50. Well, that's just wrong, like I've said before. It's wrong in terms of what your life should be about, and it's wrong in terms of, the possibilities for revolution. Because we have a real strategy, and we have a real, method to grapple with the problems that lie on the road to revolution and actually break through and gather more and more forces to where a revolutionary struggle for power could actually have a chance to win. And you can't ask for more than that. You can't ask for more than a chance to win to get this whole fucking thing off your back. And this is what we're aiming for, and this is what we got to take to people and explain to them and struggle like hell with them about what speaks to their deeper feelings and hopes and aspirations, not just the shit they're caught up in on the surface.
So what do you guys want to say in closing in response to that?
There's a thing that B.A. said in Basic, the book Basic. He said the truth in and of itself would not set you free, but you cannot get free without the truth. You know, and the truth is that this system got you fucked up. You know, they got you going up against one another, going up against, you know, your family, your friends, and people that you don't even know for absolutely nothing. You know, if you're talking about the blocks, you don't own these blocks. Cut that shit out. You know, there's always going to be a motherfucker that's badder than you, and this system is badder than damn near any one of us, except when we come together in a revolution, a communist revolution.
You know, what I would say to people is, look, if you're watching this interview, if you heard this piece, that's a challenge out there. You're being called on to step forward and to break out of the shit that you're actually in and get with this revolution and stuff. I would encourage people to get with the Chicago Revolution Club here, to go to the website and check out the RNL Show and Revcom.us. You know, people need to step forward and become emancipators of humanity.
I agree. You know, people need to, you know, go to Revcom and watch these interviews. You know, it takes things to a different level, you know, to actually be engaging this and getting up close and personal with Bob Avakian. You know, his thinking changed, you know. He wasn't always a revolutionary communist, you know. You're not born a revolutionary communist, but people have to be struggled with very ferociously, you know, and not only us here, but, you know, people who are feeling inspired or deeply impacted or moved by these interviews also need to be on that same mission, you know, to put this revolution on the map and spread the leadership of BA, you know, and dig deeper into what he's actually putting forward, because, you know, the stakes are that sharp and that deep.
All right, Andy, that was an extremely powerful segment from Bob Avakian, and it obviously reached very deeply inside Leo and Roosevelt and Hank. I just want to share one thing with our viewers. In that interview, Roosevelt mentioned his nephew, Lonzo, and losing his nephew to the streets in Chicago. That was back in 2020. And I wanted to read a portion of Lonzo's obituary because I don't know if it came through in the interview that he actually got involved in the revolution. And this was acknowledged by his family in his obituary. They wrote, "Orlando always tried to involve himself in positive things to do. He, along with his friends, became involved with the Chicago Revolutionary Center, thanks to his uncle, Roosevelt, who encouraged him on moving in the right direction. When it came down to structure, he may fall off, but he came back, as we all do. And it really matters that Lonzo lifted his head and made his life count for putting an end to this madness. And it matters that Roosevelt encouraged him in this. And it matters really urgently right now that we take up what Bob Avakian is offering in this interview and what Roosevelt and Leo and Hank were speaking to about what this can bring out of people. And go and fight for this to take root among these youth who are catching the worst hell so that no more generations have to go through this and have their lives cut down in this way." So I wanted to share that. And Andy, I don't know if you want to offer any other further reflections having sat with that interview now.
Yeah, I was struck by a comment from Bob Avakian towards the end of his answer where he spoke to something a youth in the life said, that if he got with the revolution, there's a 100% chance that he'd die. And Bob Avakian answered, and then Roosevelt echoed that this is just wrong, that there's no possibility for a revolution. BA pointed to the fact that we have a real strategy. We have a scientific method to understand the pitfalls and the difficulties of making revolution, and we have a way to break through. And in the first and second interviews, Bob Avakian spoke of his scientific assessment that because of the sharp, irreconcilable divide in U.S. society, particularly among those who rule, that we are in a unique situation where a revolutionary struggle for power could really have a chance at winning. And Sunsara, then it really got me when he said, quote, "You can't ask for more than that. You can't ask for more than a chance to win, to get this whole fucking thing off your back," he said. That grabbed me because it's bound up with BA's humanity and his scientific approach that enables him to see beneath the superficial, to the potential in the masses of the most oppressed people, and to see beneath the surface of the might of this country, the U.S., to see the deep contradictions in their system that hold a different kind of potential, the vulnerabilities of this system that open the possibility for a real revolution to win. B.A. speaks in the last answer of the interview that comes right after what we just saw, how for him to give up would be like betraying his best friend. What revolutionary speaks like that? Avakian does. Why? Because he has insisted for decades, the fundamental question is for whom and for what? For whom? For the masses of the most oppressed all over the world and for all of humanity. For what? For overcoming all forms of oppression and exploitation everywhere. What comes through in the BA interviews is his insistence that the struggle for revolution on the foundation of the new communism must be a fight for humanity without losing our humanity. This is why we say that BA brings heart and soul to being hardcore for revolution. And this is not just a matter of summoning up some revolutionary will, but by being thoroughly and consistently scientific, understanding and changing the world as it actually is. And Sunsara, in the interviews that we did with Bob Avakian, he brought all of that and reached into people, and he enabled them to see and feel the potential to be part of emancipating humanity. And you felt that with the 3 members of the Chicago Revolution Club.
Yeah, you know, especially right now, when society, as you said, is increasingly being ripped apart and people are being compelled to question things in big ways. These interviews with BA are a game changer. And any decent, any honest and intellectually curious person who cares about the state of the world and watches these interviews will be transformed by them. In these interviews, you get invited to see the world through BA's eyes, to see that things and people have not always been the way they are now, to see how they came to be this way and how they can be changed. And you get to learn how to apply that same method that he applies to furthering this process of changing the whole world. And of course, people who watch these interviews are going to have questions, things they don't understand, things they understand wrongly. But everyone who is moved and provoked by this should seriously reflect on what is contained in these interviews and what it would mean for the prospects of revolution if we succeed in making these BA interviews and BA himself increasingly a huge point of reference for hundreds, then thousands, and ultimately millions of people, with increasing waves of these people getting deeply into these interviews and into BA and getting organized into the movement for revolution that he is leading. Then get involved in the campaign to spread these interviews. Now, next week, we're going to show more from the BA interviews. We're going to show a portion that goes to the roots of the vicious Christian fascist assault on women's right to abortion and where that movement came from, and into the oppression and the liberation of women overall. And as part of that, we're going to include a further portion of what Roosevelt had to say in the conversation we aired today, where he reacts to this part of the interview from Bob Avakian. So with that, we're going to move forward in today's episode. We're going to do a short segment on the fundraising campaign that the RevComs have launched, and then we're going to hear from Rafael Kadaris about that Nazi gathering between Trump, Kanye West, and Nick Fuentes down at Mar-a-Lago. In a time when the future hangs in the balance, when solutions offered leave horrors going on, there is hope and a roadmap for the emancipation of all of humanity. We want to ask you to donate generously to make this hope a reality. If you care, and you do, You know the hour is late to save the environment. You suppress dread that the war in Ukraine and the saber rattling in China could lead to global nuclear catastrophe. You fear and you sense that any relief you felt from the midterm elections is empty. 1/3 of the country voted for fascists. Abortion rights have been stripped away. Talk of civil war abounds. You seethe with rage that 2 years after the murder of George Floyd, police continue to murder Black and brown people day after day. And you know that the plight of refugees and immigrants is not fundamentally different today than it was under Trump. Isn't now the moment to break out of your comfort zone and act on your discomfort about where things are headed? Donate generously to the movement that is bending every fiber of our beings to bring about the real solution to all of this, a real revolution in a moment when this could be possible. In his recent interviews on the RNL show, Bob Avakian says this.
The masses of people in the world, and this is very acutely and urgently posed now, the masses of people in the world cannot any longer afford. It was always terrible that these are the people ruling the world, but it's now acutely posed. We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to dominate the world and to determine the destiny of humanity. They need to be overthrown as quickly as possible.
Maybe you are asking, is an actual revolution necessary? Is it possible? Can humanity really move beyond a world of inequality where everyone is just out for themselves? Can revolution really move this whole world towards liberation? And what kind of leadership is needed to do this? Well, there are answers, and none of them are more comprehensive. None of them are filled with more heart and soul for how the revolution could really be brought about, and how this could bring into being a society where people would really flourish. Nowhere is this done more vividly and scientifically than in the RNL interviews with Bob Avakian. In these interviews, Bob Avakian draws from the lives of people of the whole world, especially those who suffer the boot of this oppressive system. He tells of his own life, growing up in Berkeley, California, his experience working with the leaders of the Black Panther Party in their early revolutionary days. He tells how he came to recognize and to fill a great need, charting the course for a real revolution here in the most powerful country in history, and developing a new framework for the emancipation of all of humanity, the new communism. In a break with past revolutions, Bob Avakian insists that this new communism thoroughly repudiates and is determined to root out of the communist movement the poisonous notion and the practice that the ends justify the means. I want you to compare this to the politics and the poisonous culture of today and think about the possibilities that this opens up. And then donate. For fundamental revolutionary change to be realized, there needs to be a revolutionary people in their thousands that can grow to millions. And to forge this and to put this revolution on the map, contending with all the other non-solutions, your financial support is decisive. Your donation today will enable a cohort of revolutionaries, the RevComs, of different nationalities, genders, and ages, to go out in society and shake up the world and forge a movement to change everything. A group of tested revolutionary leaders and a cohort of committed young revolutionaries have gathered and concentrated in Los Angeles to develop a model that can be replicated and grown nationally. Your donation will support this. And your donation will also boost the promotion of the Bob Avakian interviews. It will support the production and promotion of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show and the website revcom.us. There is no greater need, no greater love, and no more important cause at this moment in history. A radically different, a far better world is possible. But to bring that world into being, your support for this major fund drive is essential, as is your creative input and your active involvement. So to make a donation, go to revcom.us/donate. To support the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show regularly, go to patreon.com/therevcoms. And then write to us at therevcoms@gmail.com to let us know why you donated and to get involved. Together, Let's make a huge difference for humanity's future.
So a black Nazi and a white Nazi and an orange Nazi go into a golf club for dinner. This is not how the joke begins. This is how genocides begin. Last week, Donald Trump invited virulent anti-Semite, Christian fascist, MAGA moron Kanye West to dinner at his Mar-a-Lago country club. Kanye brought along his new friend, Nick Fuentes. According to Kanye, Trump was really impressed with Fuentes. According to Fuentes, Trump told me he liked me. Who is Nick Fuentes? No, he's not a far-right activist, as the Washington Post called him. He's a Nazi, an open white supremacist, misogynist, anti-Semitic, Holocaust-denying Nazi. Someone who was on the ground in Charlottesville with the torch-bearing Nazis defending a monument to slavery, and at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th for Trump's fascist coup attempt, declaring afterwards that it was awesome, and I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't. Nick Fuentes says the quiet part out loud, and he's now a rising star of the MAGA fascist movement, with close ties to Republican fascist politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, and an army of followers who call themselves Groypers. But to understand the significance of Trump beginning his campaign for president by meeting with Nick Fuentes, you have to see and hear him in his own words.
Send the military into these black neighborhoods, make the streets safe, they'll complain about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're never going to vote for us. I want this country to be run by Catholics, not Jews. This woman is worshiping rocks. She's lying about men. I said, what happened to the good old days 1,000 years ago when people like this, instead of arguing with them or saying, hey, listen, darling, everything's okay, they would dunk them in the river or burn them alive. I said, this is the kind of thing that we need to see more of. I could go on the show and say, hey, these blacks, hey, 13% of the population, half the crime, they struggle with the impulse control, they're violent. And then they'd say, bet you wouldn't say that in front of a black person because they're a thug that'll hit me. Like, this nation welcomed Jewish people into America. And then this is what we get. I've heard enough about this Holocaust. I've heard enough about it. The real Holocaust was Jesus Christ being crucified. That was a real Holocaust.
This is what's now being mainstreamed. Did the Republican Party leaders immediately condemn this Nazi meeting? They were silent for a week and then issued some half-assed condemnations that let Trump off the hook. Did Trump denounce Fuentes or try to distance himself from him? Not an inch. He merely claimed that he didn't know who Fuentes was ahead of time. Now for Trump, lying is as natural as breathing. But even if this were true, he does know who Kanye is. The guy who spent the last 2 months vomiting a tidal wave of lies and hatred against Jewish people.
DEFCON 3 on Jewish people.
I could say anti-Semitic things and Adidas can't drop me. Now what? You just get used to getting screwed by the Jewish media.
The red are the executives that are Jewish at these companies.
And he's telling me like, yo, I want you to visit the Holocaust Museum. And I was like, yo, I want you to visit Planned Parenthood. That's our Holocaust Museum.
And Kanye and Fuentes know who Trump is. A genocidal racist to his core.
These are animals.
Look at my African American over here. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Someone who is willing and eager to break all the rules and unleash violence to impose a white Christian fascist America. To all the liberals out there, if you think the MAGA threat is going away because the Republicans didn't pull off their red wave and many of the candidates that Trump endorsed lost in the midterm elections, you need to wake up and smell the fascism, brewing even more vicious, vengeful, and determined. This white supremacist fascism is not going away because it's deeply embedded in the roots and fabric of this country. Because a section of the capitalist imperialist ruling class represented by the Republican Party is convinced that this fascism is necessary in order to deal with economic and social changes that they believe are fraying and undermining the U.S. empire. and because they've unleashed a lunatic and rabid base of tens of millions that is pushing the Republican politicians to further extremes. This dinner between the #1 fascist politician, the dangerous clown Kanye, and this Nazi youth leader, and the silent endorsement of the Republican Party until they were finally forced to comment, is a sign of how far things have come and where they're heading if this dynamic continues. And one more thing. To those who say that Kanye has a point,
Kanye was right.
He's a free thinker.
You got to realize he's right. The Jays do control the music industry and everything else about America.
Kanye West is the gift that keeps on giving.
Kanye is right about this one.
Kanye West was right.
And who think that the problem is that some other group is holding you down. Maybe it's Latinos, Asians, Jews, or is it women or gay people or whoever? The only point this motherfucker has is the one that's got you falling for the oldest 3-card money game in the book. Divide and conquer. The ruling classes have used this trick for 2,000 years, playing the Jews as scapegoats, blaming them as a people, or singling out 1 or 2 prominent Jews for the ills and evils of systems founded on exploitation. Today, the name of that system is capitalism, imperialism. And until you wake up to that, you will be played against the most fundamental interests of the masses of black people and even be led to carry out horrific crimes against others. In conclusion, the last thing we need, the last thing black people and people overall need, are black Nazis.
All right, Sunsara, that brings us to the end of this, the 127th episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show on December 1st, 2022. So for myself, good night, and for the RNL crew, good night to them too, and thanks for the work they did on this show as they do every week.
All right, with that, I want to say good night, and we'll see you back next week.